Today, I would like to address the topic on the theology of restfulness. I believe this is so important in this time when all Christians live a life of busyness. We almost are in the midst of an epidemic of global busyness. And while Satan uses many tactics to discourage, to distract the Church of God, in some countries, he might use persecution. In some places, he might use deception. But I believe for many of us living in the so-called more affluent countries of the world, he uses the tactic of busyness. He persecutes the church through busyness. He addicts the church to busyness. The heresy that many churches suffer today is not some kind of strange doctrine questioning the divinity of God or the substitutionary atonement. The heresy is that it is normal for a Christian to live a life of busyness rather than a life of restfulness. Now, so today, I think this topic is exceptionally necessary. Now, there was a study done between the year of 2001 and 2007, a very large study by Christian standards. It's a survey called The Obstacles to Christian Growth. This survey covered over 1,000 Christians from many countries, but the vast majority from the US. It included countries like Singapore and the Philippines and Indonesia, but small numbers. And this survey done, it's been reported in like Christianity Today, major magazines, has come up with some quite shocking, depressing figures, but I'm sure the figures are even worse today because this was reported in 2007, a good 15 years ago. In the last 15 years, this epidemic has really accelerated and swallowed up many Christians, destroyed the lives of many, many Christians, right? So what are the findings of this survey? Overall Christians, don't talk about pastors yet, leaders, just overall Christians, 40% of 4 out of 10 Christians would say that often or always they run from one task to another task. In other words, there's no time to reflect and think and spend quiet time with God. So that's 4 and 10 or 40%. 60% say that their lifestyle gets in the way of having a good relationship with God. So we see that the vast majority of Christians are already swallowed up by this, that they have no time to reflect and their relationship with God is affected. And you say, well, those are Christians, and Christians usually don't lead that kind of optimal lifestyle. They should. Well, the sad part of this survey is that the pastors of all professions measured, managers, salespeople, all kinds of stuff, people who, talking about Christian people in managerial posts, sales posts, pastoral posts, the pastors ranked the highest in saying that they run from task to task. Highest of all the various professions that Christians are in. If you become a pastor, you're the worst off. You're the most swallowed up by this epidemic of busyness. And it says something like let me get my statistics, 54% of all pastors say they often are or always just simply running from one task to another task. Well, that's pretty sad. And 65% of them, more than the normal Christians, right, say that it affects their relationship with God. In other words, the devil's doing a great job by using this one thing called busyness and destroying the lives, the ministries of pastors, their relationship with God, which is everything, right? And just this simple tactic of Satan is doing such a powerful work in destroying the church, in destroying the leaders of the church. So I'm sure these figures, I'm very sure these figures have gone higher. There will be 65% of pastors that are saying my relationship with God is affected. I think it's going to be more than that. Who knows, 70, 80%. And it won't be 54% that say they just run from task to task. I think it's going to be higher, 60, 70, I don't know. Depends on the country you're in, depends on the type of environment, church environment, and the type of doctrines that are perpetuated in your church, stirred up by Satan, of course. And it's a terrible, terrible disease in the church, which is not generally addressed because it is not even recognized. Now, you would have thought when that statistic, that survey had come up, very well reported in the major Christian periodicals, that would have shocked the world into repentance, shocked the Christian world into repentance. But it didn't. It didn't. In fact, it didn't cause any significant ripples, right? If at all it caused anything, it may have caused something called pride rather than repentance. What do I mean by that? It's almost not a sin anymore for a pastor to say, I'm super busy, or a church member to say, my pastor is super busy. It's not like a charge against him. It is like a status symbol for him. It's like my pastor is good because he's so busy, he's running from task to task. I hope you are getting my point there. This is called deception. When you are in a sin and you think you are doing right. When you are in a sin and you think this is the best thing to do. Now, if you know it's a sin, at least there is some conviction and some control. But when you do not know it's a sin, then it runs rampant. And when you think that busyness is a status symbol of your hard work for God, right? Or status symbol of you having a pastor who's just running and running around, he's so busy, wow, I've got a good pastor, then you are seriously deceived by Satan. Now, it is quite accepted today that in the world, non-Christians will look at Christians and say, well, I know my colleague, he's a Christian, he's very busy in the office, he tries to do his best in the office. Hopefully, they say that of some Christians. But, he's always straight after work. He's rushing off to some church activity, rushing off to this, rushing off to that. You see, the normal Christian already lives in a busy, normal, shall we say, work life. And yet, he has this busyness in his work life. And now he adds busyness from the church work to his busy work life. So he's super busy. And that's the picture that good Christians give to the world. Now, several things can result from this testimony. Number one, would that be attractive to other people who are thinking, my goodness, this Christian God is some kind of God. My boss is pushing me like crazy in the office. This Christian God of theirs is similar to my boss. It's like Pharaoh, Pharaoh with making the Israelites work from morning to night to make brick, to build his monuments. Wow, this God is like Pharaoh almost, Now, is that a good testimony? I am very sure it isn't. I'm very sure while we think we are showing the world how much we love God, we're showing the world how horrible and how terrible a taskmaster is this God. I hope Christians would sit back and reflect on that. Okay? Now, what about to our own kids? Pastors' kids, for example. Many pastors' kids do not ever want to be a pastor. The testimony of their father's life, they have no time for their children, no time for their families, right? And pastors' kids often say, enough. I'll do anything in the world. I'll sweep the floor. I'll be a construction worker. Anything. Don't make me a pastor. That's all. Have mercy on me. Now, is that a good testimony? I'm sure it isn't. But have Christians reflected on this, or have we been so deceived that we think we're doing good, we're doing great, we're doing things for God? All right, so let's just look at what the Bible says about restfulness rather than busyness. Now, I believe that the second most repeated commandment in the Bible is to remember the Sabbath day. Stranger, funny commandment. You say, well, if God doesn't want you to steal and murder and commit adultery and deceive people, it's good God. But you mean God is that concerned about rest? Well, he is. Interestingly, of course, the first commandment, most repeated in the Bible, is be joyful. In various forms, God says it. And we will deal with that in another topic on the theology of joy. But the second, probably most repeated commandment is remember the Sabbath day. In simple language, take a break. Remember to take a break. Don't keep rushing from one task to another task, right? So while we are looking at the Bible, we call ourselves people who are led by the Bible, Bible-believing Christians. Do you really believe God is concerned about restfulness? Look at the very first pages of the Bible, first page of the Bible, first chapter. God created the world. And it emphasized that he took a break after 6 days of labor. Now, that has always puzzled me when I was a younger Christian. I always wondered why people thought that God is omnipotent, power limitless. Why does he need to take a rest? It's kind of contradiction, right? But I later realized God wasn't taking a rest for his own sake. He was taking a rest as a role model for us to realize we needed to get a rest. Whoa, God took a rest for what? So we realize that we, children of God, should look at this role model and follow this role model, right? And not only that, he created the world each day into morning and night, or evening in certain versions. Now, what does that mean? There's a time of daylight when you can be busy, and there's a time of darkness when you can't. You just can't. Of course, the days of pre-electricity, which was really the vast majority of human history, there was no electricity. In fact, in many countries today, there is no electricity. Now, what does that entail? It means that you have enforced rest. Wow, that is so amazing to me, right? That right in the first chapter of the Bible, God puts rest as a critical part of his creation. Whether it's animals, whether it's men, there's a period of work and there's a period of restfulness, right? Now, then we go on to see in the Exodus, all right, the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, some of them are very short, right? Thou shalt not commit murder. Thou shalt not steal. But there are two commandments that seem to be elaborated. The first one, the first long one, is on idolatry. Don't make to you graven images, don't bow to them, etc., images of anything in heaven, the sky, the sea, and so on. The second elaborated commandment in Exodus 20 is on the Sabbath day. Take a rest. Your animals take a rest. Everyone takes a rest. All right? Two long commandments in the midst of the 10 commandments. One dealing with idolatry, one dealing with rest. You wonder why these two are so major. I've reflected on them. Idolatry means I trust another God. God doesn't like that. You trust one God, there's just one God. Don't put your trust in other gods. Then what's rest got to do? Why so major? Because rest says you don't need to trust yourself to get results. You can trust me. Do your best, leave the rest. Right? Just like you don't need to run to idols for results. Trust God. Sit back after that and watch God work. Do your best. Trust God. No need to run to idols. Restfulness. Trust God. No need to run to yourself to get the results. All right? So the two elaborated commandments in the Bible, to me, speak of faith in this one God. No little idols to look to, no little self to look at God. All you need to do is just do your best, trust Him, go to rest after that. All right? So I hope this helps us to get our biblical balance, right? Now, what about the New Testament? Well, look at the life of Jesus. Perfect. There was a story of how Jesus was so busy the whole day, preaching, then feeding the 5,000. And that's found in Mark chapter 6. And at the end of that day, a long day of busyness and amazing miracle of feeding the 5,000. Jesus, you would have thought, would have sat back with all his disciples and recapped the day. And after a very tired day, still continue to try to end the day on a high note, so to speak. What did Jesus do in Mark chapter 6, verse 45 and 46? After this long, victorious day, so to speak, of great events, he sends his disciples away in a boat, and he himself goes up to the mountain to take a break and to pray. I like that. That speaks to me of that hard work, take a rest. Don't run from task to task. There's no need for that. Then we see a very famous story in the Bible of Martha and Mary. Martha was so excited that she could serve her Lord. So she's running around making sure everything is perfect. Nothing is at fault. She's wearing herself down, doing her best for her Lord. That's a good thing to do, but it's not the best thing. Mary, her sister, on the other hand, realizes that she had already helped. There were things to do, maybe little things here and there to make things even a little better. I'm sure Mary had helped prepare for this. But when Jesus came, Mary realized it's time to take a break and just focus on the Lord. Martha was putting everything on herself and was running around. And in Luke chapter 6, verse 10, Luke chapter 10, verse 41 and 42, Jesus tells Martha, Martha, Mary has chosen the right thing. I hope we see there are good things to do. Working hard is a good thing. Martha was doing a good thing. But the best thing is to have restfulness after you've done your best. You don't need to do your best, and have no rest. I hope this is something that we will learn. Christian life is always that balance, right? We do our part and we step back and watch God do his part. Okay? So it's not about us just going on and on and on and having no rest, right? Now, why do Christians do this? This is the question. Do they not know the Bible? Do they not know that God took a break? Do they not know there was a day, there's a night? Do they not know, remember the Sabbath day is repeated over and over again? Do they not know these things? I'm sure they do. And why? Are they willfully, can I say, maybe in a rough way, breaking the law of God, rebelling against this law? Several reasons. I want to give you 5 common reasons. I'm sure there are far more. Number one is many Christians have never been taught that doing good is not necessarily doing God's will. Martha didn't learn that. She was doing good, she wasn't doing evil. But the key thing in life is to say no to anything that is not in God's will, even if it's good. Say no. Pastors, Christians must learn to say no graciously, even to good things that you know are not in God's will. Right? Example, me as a pastor, a leader, a father, and husband, there are many invitations to do this, do that, go to this activity and be my church members and have communion and, pray for this and pray for that. But I have a wife, I have kids. I have to know that it's God's will for me to minister to my family as a priority. It's not wrong to minister to some friend of a friend of a friend. There's nothing wrong. But there are priorities. I have to say no to the lesser priorities. All right. So many Christians have this idea that it is good we do, simply because they've never had the courage and had the knowledge to know how to say no graciously. In the will of God, we must say no very often. Often we are asked to do things. We have to ask ourselves question number one, is it the will of God? Number two, is there someone else who could do this better than me? Is there someone else who could do this and be trained to be better than me? Is there someone else I should have equipped to do this? Is there someone else I could delegate to do this? Right? Now, all these questions we have to ask rather than just saying yes to everything that comes our way. Christians want to be nice guys. Pastors want to be nice guys. They don't want God's will. They just want to have popularity. They want to be the nice guy, right? No, for me, I want to do God's will primarily, right? Not just to win elections and votes. That everybody says he's a nice guy. I want God to say, this is my boy. He understands what I want. He is primarily focused on doing my will as revealed in the Word of God. All right? So number one, many Christians don't know how to say no, and they feel that as Christians, they should never say no. As pastors, they should never say no. They just want to be the nice guy. Number two, sad to say, many pastors, leaders, Christians, feel important when they're busy. They feel significant. They like to walk around with the label, I'm busy. In other words, I'm an important guy. Everybody needs me, right? They think this makes them become more significant. They don't realize this makes them more disobedient. They don't realize that this busyness doesn't make them look good, right? But it actually makes them look, in the eyes of God, rebellious. The God of peace, the gracious God is their God, not the slave master God. They don't realize that they're killing their own selves spiritually because their relationships with God primarily are being destroyed. 65% of pastors say it affects their relationship with God, busyness. So it doesn't make you significant, it doesn't make you important, it makes you rebellious. It makes you a suicidal pastor who is killing yourself, killing your ministry, often killing your family. All right? You are a horrible testimony. You're not an important person. You're a terrible testimony. Who wants to be a pastor like you, running around, sweating, looking harassed? And you say, I'm so busy, and you love to hear your church members say, my pastor is so busy. He has no time to do this or that. My goodness, what God do you serve? All right, so that's number two. Number three, many leaders, particularly pastors, particularly, are unsure of God's role for them. Many pastors still who read the Bible who memorize the Bible, many key verses, including Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 and 12, which tells us God gives, apostles and prophets and teachers, pastors, for the equipping of the saints for the work of the ministry, right? But instead of obeying this, realizing the job as pastor is to pastor people, to train people, to make disciples of people who can be equipped for the work of the ministry. They do the work of the ministry themselves. They are the lone equipped person in the entire church doing everything. Their job is not to equip the saints. Their job is to serve. Their job is to do the work of the ministry themselves. They don't run a training camp for God's army to reach the world. They run a perpetual hospital, a perpetual club, a perpetual hotel to serve clients who come in and to take care of them and serve them, and they go out exactly the same. They're not sure of God's role for themselves. Common. The vast majority of Christians, pastors, are like that. They're busy. When I see a busy pastor, I don't see a significant, I don't see a hard-working pastor. I see a failed pastor. Pastor who doesn't know his role. I mean, everybody who goes to a job must know his job. If I'm a brain surgeon, I go into the theater, I do my brain surgery. I hope I do it well. I don't scrub the theater floors. I'm in charge of the theater. I make sure I train somebody to make sure the theater is clean. I make sure the equipment's working properly. I make sure the rosters are properly done. I mean, I'm in charge of the director of, say, the surgical ward. But my job is to do my brain surgery well and to train my staff, my team in the operating theater to do their jobs. Now, imagine you went to an operating theater and the brain surgeon is saying, I'm very, very busy. Let me finish cleaning the floor first. Let me just check the equipment after this. Let me make sure the roster is working properly. All right? Make sure that the payroll is properly done. Excuse me, Mr. Brain Surgeon, have you lost your brains? Now, I wish people would tell pastors that. I wish every time a pastor said he was busy, I wish their members, their friends, their fellow pastors would tell them, busy about what? Training your people to do the work of the ministry? Or busy about doing other people's ministry? Which they should be doing. You should have trained them to do that. Well, here we go. Deception. They feel proud that they're doing everything. And church members rah-rah them. Okay? And somebody on the sideline called Satan is saying, keep it up, wear yourself out, make a fool of yourself, destroy your ministry, destroy the testimony of God, keep it up. All right? Number 4. It's a complicated lifestyle. Many of us are swept up in this world of over-choice. This is something that Satan uses to distract us. It's a very complicated world out there. So many choices to make, things to see, attractions. Pastors are busy about social media, irrelevant things, posting photographs here, seeing photographs of their friends eating here, going on holiday. It's very complicated lifestyle, full of drawing you away from all kinds of things. I mean, we need a break, we need a rest, right? But it's almost like an addiction to this complicated, busy lifestyle. To see a pastor just really have quiet time. I don't mean just that compulsory 20 minutes in the morning where they pray and open the Bible a little bit. I'm not talking about that. Just to step back, reflect, sense the presence of God, sense the leading of God, sense God around us in everything. Just stepping back from the complicated, endless attractions and distractions of life. Well, you have to make a choice, okay? To be sucked into that lifestyle, to follow the way of life, right? Okay, of this world, Romans chapter 12, right? Now, and lastly, sad to say, busyness is often an excuse for lazy people. You know, when you're busy, people are afraid to give you another piece of work. So you show a lot of busyness. You mention a lot of busyness. Of course, it's a bad testimony, but it keeps people from asking you to do more. That's one tactic. Not everybody uses it, but sometimes it prevents you from getting additional work. But more commonly, it prevents you from doing work you don't like. Busyness about easy things is okay, opening the church door, sweeping the church floor, and arranging things in the church, and those things are quite routine. I don't need a lot of thinking, but it saves you from having to get into more messy things. Maybe there's some relation problem in between two elders that really need to be fixed, but it's never fixed because you're always busy with mundane things like Martha, and you have no time to do things you don't like to do, like getting into important things, settling disputes, settling major issues in the church. Saves me the trouble. And lastly, it's an excuse to reset priorities, to reset your life, to change your routine lifestyle. It's difficult. You got to get out of your comfort zone. Like this message gets you out of your comfort zone. You have to reset your priorities. And then you begin to say, oh no, if I had time, I'm supposed to reset my priorities. This lecture, this lesson on restfulness, but I have no time to reset my priorities. I wish I had time. You see, it's an excuse. Common, very common. Human nature, the heart is deceitful. We trick ourselves. The devil just adds fuel to the fire. And we self-deceive a lot. Often busyness is nothing more than an excuse for laziness, for extra work, right? For complicated work, for getting out of my comfort zone. Not for me, right? So here we see 5 problems. Number 1, don't know how to say no. So what's your solution? Learn to say no to whatever you think is not in the will of God. Learn to say no graciously, not to a person, but say no to the suggestion or the request. The difference between saying no to someone hurts him. Say, I wish I could help you, but this is something I believe such and such a person can do better than me. He's trained to do it. Can I request him? We have a meeting and I'll ask him to help you on this, right? Okay. Can you speak at such and such? I wish I could, but I believe this is something that I'm not good at, and somebody else is better trained than me. Can I suggest this person? Right? So learn to say no. Don't take everything that comes along, right? Number 2, the feeling of importance and significance. I'm busy, so I must be a very popular, very important person. I'm not true at all. You're probably a very inefficient person, right? You're probably a mess in your life. You're probably out of God's will. Be careful when you're busy. Ask yourself, is it I'm important or I am rebellious? Is it because I'm a great testimony by running from here to there? Or I'm a terrible testimony to my family, to my church, to the world at large, to God, right? Then, unsure of God's will, number 3. The pastors feel that their job is from janitor to preacher, in between Sunday school, superintendent, choir leader, choir member, and everything else in between, helping everything, the garden, the cooking, and everything else. Well, if you don't know that, just read Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 and 12, and realize your primary role is making disciples. Simply multiplying yourself so that you can always keep multiplying. Whatever you do, you'll never have more than 24 hours a day for yourself. You never have more than 2 hands and 1 mouth. You can't multiply your mouths and your hands, but you can make disciples and multiply your mouths and your hands and your time. A good pastor is always has time for training, always has time for his family, always has time for priorities, and most of all, always has time to sit back and enjoy and reflect on God. Number 4, a complicated lifestyle, Learn not to be caught up in the way of the world, where they jump from one box, one channel, one attraction to another, one app to another app. You don't need all that. I'm fairly well connected to the world without opening Facebook. I don't own Instagram. I open Facebook a couple of minutes a week. When I'm totally bored and waiting for something, my brain is already not functioning. Just flip through it and that's it. I don't need to be complicated by a world. If they want to have their lives running from here to there, doing nothing significant, that's their choice. I need some distractions. I need some rest. But I'm not going to have addiction and call that rest. And number 5, check yourself. Is your business, or at least your sense of business, an excuse for laziness to do important things like relationships with God and men? Definitely it's easier to go to the garden of the church and tend the garden. It's easier to set things up in the church than build relationships and with difficult people. All right? Or reaching out to the community and building bridges. Definitely harder to do that. So just stay in the 4 walls of the church and look busy. What about your priorities? Okay, have you ever really worked on your priorities? Now, let me end with 2 verses that really helped me, okay, in my busy lifestyle, right? One of it is found in Psalm 127 and verse 2. It is vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil. For he gives to his beloved sleep or rest. All right? All this anxious toil that we do, it's vain, running from here to there. You say, really, Pastor, is it vain? Look at the results. By your fruit, you will know. 30 years in your church, laboring, anxious toil, day in, day out. You retire, they give you a nice dinner, say goodbye to you, call you the emeritus pastor or some fancy title, and you look at the church. The number of people, pretty much the same. Some died, some few new ones came in. It's 50 years, your church. Your anxious toil, what have you built? Not a lot. By your fruit, you will know. Have you impacted your community? Have you impacted the world around you? Have you left a huge testimony? Have you trained workers who can go forth and into all the world and make disciples who make disciples who make disciples? All that anxious toil. No need. God says, no need. I give you rest. Do your best. Trust me. Reflect, think, reprioritize, keep learning, and you will have all the rest you want and all the results you should get. And maybe Matthew 6:34, take no thought for the morrow takes thought of the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. No need to worry so much about tomorrow. Fix it today, fix it yourself. Ask yourself, all right, are you affected, inflicted, debilitated, damaged by the disease of busyness? Or have you learned the joy of restfulness? Serving God in God's will at rest. Just do your best, not anxious toil. Toil, work hard in partnership with God. Just know all He wants is your best. doing his will, and you can trust him to do the rest. May God give you a life of restfulness, not busyness. We serve a wonderful, gracious God who wants us to have rest, joyful rest in him. God bless you.